People think ADHD is about focus or fidgeting, but for a lot of us, the hardest part isn't attention, it's our emotions. The mood swings, the shame spirals, the overreactions we regret 5 minutes later. Honestly, emotional dysregulation has been the hardest part of ADHD for me too. It's not in the diagnostic criteria, but it impacts my relationships, my self-worth, my day-to-day life. So what is emotional dysregulation? And why is it so common with ADHD? And most importantly, how can we cope with it? I'm Dr. Batty. Let's get into it. Hello, I'm Dr. Batty, and I apply my over a decade of experience as a psychologist and a professor to unpack issues of neurodivergence, non-monogamy, social justice issues, race, and liberation. Welcome to my channel, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Currently, the ADHD diagnosis is based on symptoms of inattention and hyperactivity. And in a capitalist society, these traits are important because they hinder productivity. So they are seen as the problem. But for many of us, those aren't the hardest parts. 34 to 70% of adults with ADHD report emotional dysregulation that disrupts our lives. And for many of us, it's the hardest part. So, what is emotional dysregulation? In a nutshell, emotional dysregulation is having big feelings, as I like to call them, and struggles with managing those big feelings. So, it can show up as things like being quick-tempered, having moods swing rapidly from one extreme to the next, which is one of the reasons that sometimes ADHD is misdiagnosed as bipolar disorder. But we do not have mania if you just strictly have ADHD, but we do tend to have these mood swings. Hyperfocus is sometimes confused with mania. It can also look like just getting overwhelmed very quickly. It can look like crying a lot. It can look like being extra sensitive to rejection, whether that's actual rejection or something that we perceive as rejection. It can look like constant conflict in our relationships, intense conflict. How does emotional dysregulation relate to the rest of our ADHD symptoms? Well, it's linked to more severe ADHD symptoms. It's linked to poor mental health outcomes. And it's also even linked to more criminal convictions. So it is an important part. So why do people with ADHD struggle more with emotional dysregulation? Well, partly this is from brain differences. In ADHD brains are different from childhood. And so it's partly related to that. But the environment also matters. So 44% of adults with ADHD have a history of childhood trauma. And we know that people that do have childhood trauma tend to struggle more with emotional dysregulation. And then there's also the trauma of just having ADHD in a very neurotypical world. And especially for those of us who are diagnosed as adults, we have experienced a lifetime of being pathologized, told that we're wrong, of being misunderstood, and being rejected for our ADHD. And this can be a traumatic experience, especially because it tends to go on for years. For those of us who are assigned female at birth, we are expected from a young age to prioritize other people's emotions over our own. And the idea that we are not able to live up to the potential that others see in us and we let them down, we disappoint them, that's a very painful experience. So you are not too much. I know a lot of us have been told that. Your nervous system was just designed in a way to help you survive, not necessarily to conform to other people's rules. And I personally was diagnosed in my 20s, and emotional dysregulation, I've definitely improved a lot, but I still struggle with it sometimes now in my 40s. But with the right tools and support, it does get easier to regulate ourselves and to recover faster. What are some ways that we can cope with the emotional dysregulation of ADHD? Regulate the reaction. Naming a feeling can help us be less tied down to it. So if we are able to say something like, I'm feeling overwhelmed, rather than repeating the message that we've gotten of, I'm lazy, or, I don't try enough. Instead, to say, this is what I'm feeling right now, and labeling an emotion can reduce its intensity. Question the story. So this is not unique to people with ADHD, but essentially the thoughts we have in those moments of distress are often a byproduct of things that happened in our past, potentially previous disturbing incidences or traumas. And so they're not always the most accurate representation of what's actually going on. So one of the things that we might have internalized is something like, I always mess up, I always fail. So if your brain is telling you that in that moment, try to slow down that process and pause and ask yourself, is that true, or is this just a familiar feeling? Let the emotions flow by. So this is great for those of us who are visual, who learn visually. Picture your feelings as if they're floating by on a river, and just watch them go by. The river continues to flow, and just allow your emotions to sort of flow through you and let them pass without pulling you under. And this can also be a good reminder that as intense as the emotion is in the moment, it is temporary. Move the energy. So this could look like shaking, it could look like stretching, it could look like stomping your feet, because movement really helps us discharge the emotions that we're feeling. I find that this is particularly helpful with anger especially. So try to do some form of movement for 30 seconds. You could try like just shaking out your hands, dancing for 30 seconds, and that can really just help release that emotion. Set a short-term goal when it comes to your emotions. So I like putting time limits on crying. I have a lot of clients who, when they first start to let themselves cry, there's this worry that they will cry forever. That like, if I start crying, I don't know when I'll stop. And that's typically not realistic. Generally, people don't cry forever. But it can feel very real, and it's absolutely valid to feel that, especially if you have been taught that crying is not good. A lot of times people assigned male at birth are taught, don't cry, be a man. He's 3. So allowing ourselves to cry is a process in and of itself. So maybe let yourself do it for 10 minutes, give yourself a time limit, and really allow yourself to cry for that time period. Be here now. Notice what's going on around you. Sometimes this can look like, what are the 5 senses giving you? Like, what can you see, smell, taste, etc. Notice your breath in that moment. Notice the colors. I love going to nature, like looking at the colors in the sky. Like, what do you see? Notice just how your body feels in that moment. Notice how you feel in a chair. Notice your feet on the ground. And this can help us just be present in what we're feeling, because ironically, when we avoid these intense emotions, that actually tends to make it worse. So this relates to one of my favorite things to say in therapy, which is, if you don't work on it, it works on you. So when we feel these intense emotions, it's natural to want to avoid them. And sometimes we need to, because we just need to get through our day. Like, we can't, attend to it in that moment. But when we have that space to really be present with ourselves, that is actually such a good tool for managing emotional dysregulation. Prevent and repair ruptures in our relationships. Vent to yourself first. This is really important, and I used to struggle with this a lot, where I felt like, okay, I'm feeling these emotions, having these thoughts, and they are about this person. So I just need to tell them. We're taught to sometimes communicate everything. And so I just need to tell them everything that I'm feeling and thinking. Some of that should have stayed in the drafts. Some of that was not actually an accurate representation of what I was thinking or feeling, or not a permanent reflection of what I'm experiencing with that person. So it can be really helpful to, before we communicate, especially if we're feeling very dysregulated, to journal about it, to do a voice note to ourselves. And then once we do that, we can look over it, listen to it, and then we can decide which parts do I want to share with that person. So it helps us get our feelings out and also recognize what are the key parts that I do want to share, if anything. Sometimes I've had moments where I'm extremely emotionally dysregulated about someone, but then once those intense emotions pass, I actually realize that that wasn't really accurate at all. So there's really no need to share it. So take a time out. So that's something a lot of us do as kids, but we don't really do as much as adults. Sometimes it can be really helpful just to take a break in the conversation. And it can be helpful to just have a code word or words that you say that indicates that you want a timeout, because in the moment, sometimes it's hard to find the right words. So something like red alert, or just simply having a phrase that you ask, like, I'm feeling really emotional right now. Can we pause and come back later? And this can also be something that you work out with your partners, with your friends, roommates. That can be helpful. And you can come up with that code word together. Own your impact. So as much as we can say that, yes, this is related to our ADHD, we are still responsible for any damage that we cause while we're dysregulated. And so the best way to own our impact is to use I statements. So rather than you did this, you did this, you did this, instead using I statements. So it could be something like, I'm sorry for how my anger affected you. I'm working on it, and I'm hoping to do better. And then actually work on it. Prepare for the next storm. So if we struggle with emotional dysregulation, and it's something that we've struggled with for a long time, it's not realistic to think that we'll never experience it again. We can probably experience it less intensely, less frequently. But if we expect that we are never going to have it again, that can just set us up to fail. But if we think that it's never going to happen again, that can just set us up for failure. So it could be helpful to create what I call a rescue list. So writing down 3 to 5 things that help during emotional dysregulation. So maybe taking a walk, punching a punching bag, listening to a particular playlist. I love making playlists for different reasons. Ones that are for anger, ones that are for sadness, and keep that rescue list somewhere visible. Communicate how others can support you. Really reflect on what does help you from others when you are feeling emotionally dysregulated. And that could be space, it could be silence, it could be reassurance. And let people know that before you need it, before you're in that heat of the moment and it's hard to articulate that. Celebrate the daily wins. So did you pause instead of snapping? Did you write out your feelings before you shared them? That's all progress. Really take it in and celebrate those seemingly small wins, because all of those are victories for you, and those are a result of your own hard work. So, as a final thought, you're not broken. You're just wired differently. The fact that we are able to feel those unpleasant feelings so deeply, it also allows us to feel joy just as deeply. It also allows us to laugh from the deepest part of our belly. And this is something that I've seen referred to as ADHD euphoria, and our ability to just bring that joy is such a strength. Emotional dysregulation is really hard, but you're not alone, and you are not without tools. Start small, baby steps. Be gentle with yourself and keep going. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.